Good morning, everyone. Your Sunday weather briefing for this May 20th shows that there are no major changes in the forecast that will be impacting at least the start of trading for tonight. Rain's falling somewhere in the Corn Belt on a daily basis, at least over the next week, before conditions dry out to some degree in week two. Daily threat of at least widely scattered rains in the mid-south and southeast, with rainfall and chances enhanced there by a tropical system for next weekend. A daily threat of rain somewhere in the hard red belt for several more days, but their best rainfall chances largely behind them and dry in the northern plains through Tuesday before they start to see some rainfall chances on Wednesday. Temperature and rainfall maps this morning. Only things that I want to point out is still looking at some moderation in temperatures in central and eastern portions of the nation for the 11 to 15 day time frame. That would be especially the case for about May 29th through May 31st. Overall, for the rainfall part of the forecast, probably your better rainfall chances in a lot of the central portion of the nation coming in week one, with things tending to dry out to some degree for the 6 to 10 and 11 to 15 day time frames. QPF discussion this morning. I think that overall this forecast is too wet. I don't have any real disagreement with the bigger rains that they show in northwestern Iowa and nearby areas, though note that a lot of that rainfall is going to be occurring late in this period, so there is time for that forecast to adjust. Otherwise, especially with regards to coverage, I think that this map is just overall overemphasizing the type of rains that are going to be seen for the next 5 days. Certainly rainfall amounts just as heavy or even heavier than this map shows, but I do think that it is over illustrating the type of coverage that can be seen in this time frame. For days 6 to 7, I like the fact that this map is showing rainfall chances decreasing in this time frame for the plain states, with your better rainfall chances to the east of there. Certainly agree with where the better rains are shown. I think though that overall rainfall totals could be better than shown, but rainfall coverage probably less than this map would indicate. Mid-morning radar on this Sunday shows that widely scattered showers and a few thunder showers are occurring at this time in both the western and eastern Corn Belt. With regards to rains that have fallen so far this weekend in the Corn Belt, I think that certainly a big surprise is what has occurred across a big portion of South Dakota, into northern Iowa, and into Minnesota. Now, that's an area that was expected to see easily enough rainfall during the last 48 hours, I should say, to bring fieldwork operations there to a halt. But you can see that it has been much drier than expected, with rains there very light in nature. A lot of places seeing nothing at all. Another thing to point out for the last 48 hours with regards to rainfall is some very nice rains that have fallen across a sizable portion of the hard red winter wheat belt. As usual, not everyone getting what they wanted to see, but a fairly large part of the area seeing rains of easily more than an inch. With regards to radar estimated rainfall for the last 7 days, again note that wet area of the northwestern Corn Belt to eastern South Dakota into northern Iowa and into Minnesota. A lot of you probably saw that I was out of the office for the late morning and afternoon hours on Friday, and that was due to the fact that I was helping my brother finish up soybean planting in northeastern Iowa. On my drive back from northeastern Iowa yesterday morning, I was simply amazed and awestruck at the amount of fieldwork activity that was ongoing at that time in northern Iowa. Very difficult to find really any fields that were not seeing planting activity at that time. So it's a situation, given the fact that we have seen such a lower than expected rainfall total in that area during the last 48 hours, and that's an area that has seen very little rainfall for the last 7 days. Clearly it is a situation where northern Iowa, Minnesota, and eastern South Dakota is seeing easily their best window to get fieldwork opportunities done right now. And again, because the rainfall has been so limited, there is still widespread fieldwork activity going on in that area even on this Sunday morning. Again, with regards to the hard red belt, you can see that we have seen just some wonderful rains across a very big portion of that area during this past week. Only extreme southwestern areas not seeing appreciable rainfall, and you can see that for a lot of areas, rainfall amounts over the last week has been more than 2.5 or even 3 inches. A look at the probable look of the radar as projected by one of the high resolution short range models this evening. This is a look at what the radar should look like as the markets come to an open on this Sunday evening. Again, a situation where we'll see some widely scattered rains across portions of the Corn Belt. By the time we get to 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, widely scattered rains once again, maybe a little bit better coverage and amounts than what we see this evening, but at the same time still big portion of the Corn Belt not seeing rains at that time. A look look at surface features projected by the various models as of 7 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, you can see that at that time, maybe a little bit more concentrated area of rainfall in northwestern Iowa and nearby areas, kind of agreed to at that time by various weather models. But otherwise, again, a situation just widely scattered rains across some portions of the central third of the nation at that time. As we get to Saturday morning, again, as I mentioned earlier, still a situation where we could be seeing a named tropical storm impacting some portion of the Gulf Coast at that time. You can see that there is more model spread on the exact position of the storm system at that time. I think you probably have to most disagree with the Canadian model with its rather intense look at the storm system at that time. Canadian model is typically not one that you follow with regards to tropical systems. But again, notice that we are seeing more spread between the European and GFS models at that time, with the GFS having any sort of a system to the east of Florida at that time, European model having a system more at the mouth of the Mississippi River. What they do both agree, though, is that if there is a named storm system at that time, it would just be a weak tropical system at worst. With regards to 2-week rainfall totals, again, I want to emphasize that the first week of the 2-week forecast is likely going to be wetter than the second week. For the plain states, I think that the biggest rains are now behind us with regards to the hard red winter wheat belt. For the corn belt, I think that rainfall over the next week is going to be quite a bit more significant than what we see in week 2. With regards to these 2-week rainfall totals as a whole, I think that I can't disagree with the amount shown, and clearly the weather pattern is not wet. What has to be emphasized once again, though, is that the rainfall amounts that are shown, especially for the plain states and for the corn belt, rainfall amounts, I can't disagree with what is shown. It is the coverage that has to be considered. I do not think that overall coverage of the rains that are going to be seen in this time frame will be anywhere big as the maps would indicate. Amounts as good as the maps indicate, yes. It is the coverage, though, that will probably be a fair amount less than what the maps suggest, and that would be especially the case for the second week of the 2-week forecast. Overall, the week 1 time frame probably being wetter for both the plain states and the corn belt than will be week 2. With regards to temperatures coming up on this Sunday, still a fairly decent temperature contrast being seen across the Corn Belt. Northern and northwestern portions of the region seeing highs on this Sunday just in the 60s, 50s for some areas, while to the southeast, 70s and 80s being widespread, even some 90s for portions of the mid-south. By the time we get to Tuesday, though, warmer temperatures going to be seen all across the nation's midsection, and that warmth will be lasting through at least the May 28th time frame. Looking at high temperatures on Friday, you can see widespread 80s and 90s across most of the middle of the country. Obviously, any 90s confined to mainly the plain states. As I mentioned earlier, though, we are looking at a period of moderating temperatures for especially central and eastern portions of the nation for around the May 29th through 30th time frame. This is looking at temperature anomalies for May 30th, and you can see that the various models are in general agreements of some moderation in temperatures for especially central and eastern portions of the nation for May 29th through the 31st, then warmer temperatures again being seen across most of the country as we get towards the opening few days of June. Internationally, I thought that rainfall this weekend was pretty much as expected for Paraná and Mato Grosso do Sul, Safrina corn areas with a lot of 1-inch rainfall totals there. You can see that the forecast is decidedly drier than normal all across the Safrina corn areas of Brazil for the next 2 weeks. Note that a lot of the northern areas seeing little or nothing during that time frame. Paraná and Mato Grosso do Sul looking at completely dry weather for today through Thursday before they see some modest rains for Friday, and then some additional rains coming up for late in the weekend, and probably some additional rains there for the 11 to 15 day time frame. Over in Europe and the former Soviet Union, still clearly not the wettest weather pattern that I've ever seen, but for both areas, looking at near to perhaps a little bit below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks. For the Russian winter wheat areas, probably their best rains coming during the 1 to 5 and 11 to 15 day time frames, with rainfall there more on the order of below normal for the 6 to 10 day time frame. In Canada, not a lot of rainfall in the 2-week forecast for the Canadian wheat areas. What is shown there on the 10-day rainfall there on the left is mainly going to be falling for around the Thursday-Friday time frame, and most of that confined to Manitoba and southeastern portions of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and northwestern portions of Saskatchewan, probably seeing very little in the way of rainfall for the entire 5-day time frame. Note that we're going to be seeing quite a bit of anomalous warmth in the forecast for the Canadian prairies. Temperatures there running a good 15 degrees degrees above normal for a big portion of that area for around this Thursday. That's not extreme heat, but high temperatures for especially the middle and latter portions of this work week period on the Canadian prairies, being well up into the 80s. Finally, for this morning in Australia, below normal rainfall for a big portion of the eastern wheat areas of Australia for the next 2 weeks. You can see, though, that normal rains are going to be seen in some of the western winter wheat areas of Australia. A lot of that is due to the fact that we are still looking at some very nice rains for around this Thursday for a large portion of the wheat area of Western Australia. That same area could also see some modest rains for the 11 to 15 day time frame. So if you're looking at below normal rainfall in Australia, it is strictly confined to eastern areas for the next 2 weeks, where rainfall will be very limited. For western areas, though, a solid rainfall threat coming up for this Thursday, potentially a little bit of additional rainfall there in the 11 to 15 day time frame as well. That's what I have for this Sunday. Everyone have themselves a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.